Welcome back. You're watching To The Point. The interview Arun Shouries gave this program on Friday has met with two polar opposite responses. Some people view it as a stinging critique of the Modi government that could affect the way it's perceived. Others say Mr. Shourie has a grudge because he hasn't got a position in this government and describe him as a fair-weather friend. With me to discuss these two irreconcilable viewpoints is the Associate Editor of the Business Standard, Mihir Sharma, the Prime Minister's best-known biographer, Nilanjan Mukhopadhyay, the Executive Editor of Headlines Today, Javed Ansari, and BJP spokesperson, Sudhanshu Mittal. Mihir Sharma, let me start with the simple issue I want to discuss. Has Arun Shourie embarrassed the BJP with his sharp critique of the Modi government, or is he a fair-weather friend with a grudge and an ulterior motive?
I think that it's quite unfair to Mr. Shourie to say he's a fair-weather friend. He's been outspoken in his entire career. As a minister under the Vajpayee government, he made no secret of his disagreements with, various other ministers in the cabinet, Murli Manohar Joshi, Ram Naik, George Fernandes. He has, and let's face it, he has dedicated a large proportion of his life to right-wing ideology and the BJP in particular. I think it's a little tough to call him a fair-weather friend at this point in his career. If he has chosen to speak about whatever his concerns may be, I think he should be seen as a well-wisher by the government. I mean, he represents the view of a lot of people who are sympathetic to them.
Narendra Modi, you have an understanding of the BJP that perhaps is unparalleled. Writing in the Economic Times today, you say, and I'm quoting you, Shourie has not only spoken for himself, his views are shared by several others, including party veterans. Does that suggest that Shourie is not simply reflecting criticism of the Modi government, but possibly a small group of dissent within the BJP?
I think he's echoing voices which are not being heard outside, which are not being said very loudly. But yes, anybody walking through the corridors of the BJP, talking to people, you do hear there's this word in Hindi which is called sukbugahat. That it's something is simmering beneath the surface. It is there in the cabinet, it is there in very high levels of the party, and it would be there across the length and breadth of various affiliated organizations of the RSS. Mind you, we're not talking only about the government, we're not talking only about the party secretariat, we're talking about the entire Sangh Parivar, the entire phalanx of organizations which make up the Sangh Parivar, which is, my estimate is close to about 100 odd organizations, just in every conceivable sphere of political
and an element of dissent runs right through.
It runs right through that. There is a huge element of arrogance in this government, and which is not good. It needs to look outside the small little core group which is running the party and the government.
So Arun Shourie has exposed and brought into public view something that people like you were aware of, but the rest of the world was unaware of. He's then therefore done a service.
Being aware of is one thing, but the point, the last point which I had made is that a large section within the RSS feels that someone had to bell the cat, and they feel very happy that someone outside the RSS has done it.
Javed Ansari, let me put the opposite viewpoint to you. There is no doubt that last year at this time, Arun Shourie was presenting himself as a champion of Mr. Modi. He gave interviews, including to me, where he hinted at his intimacy with Mr. Modi. And certainly many in the media assumed that he was a potential future finance minister. A year later, he hasn't got any job from Mr. Modi. And many in the BJP turn around and say, this is sour grapes. This is the anguish of a frustrated man. Is that a fair comment, or is that motivated?
Karan, there may be a sense of bitterness, but there's also a heavy dose of bitter reality. There is no denying the fact that Mr. Shourie was at one time considered a potential finance minister, but to boil everything down to the fact that these are sour grapes would be doing injustice to a man who's over the years developed a reputation for saying things as it is. If there is a case of sour grapes, it's elsewhere, and we know where it is.
Sudhanshu Mittal, from your point of view, I put it to you that there are three problems you have to contend with. First of all, Arun Shourie was a very valued and highly respected member of Atal Bihari Vajpayee's government. Secondly, he's a highly regarded editor, author and columnist. But perhaps most importantly of all, he's a man who carries enormous weight with large segments of public opinion. So when he publicly criticizes the Modi government, and this is the question I want to ask you, do people take his views seriously, or do they dismiss them on the grounds that this is the anguish of a frustrated man? And I want you to answer that honestly.
Very honestly speaking, Karanji, I think we are making a mountain out of a mole. I have the transcript of your interview. I don't need to read it, but allow me this liberty. You said the first question you put was, before we discuss Mr. Modi's government in detail, let me ask you a simple setting question. What impression have you drawn from the first year in office? Are you impressed or disappointed? What is the reply? Well, for efforts to the Prime Minister, 100%. Other ministers, I don't know what they're doing.
Forgive me, I'm just interrupting you. You left out a critical word. You left out a critical word. He didn't say first to the Prime Minister 100% full stop. He said first to the Prime Minister 100% on energy. On energy, right? You left out that word. You made it seem as if it was a carte blanche 100%. It wasn't. It was on energy. You're slightly misquoting him.
Yeah, what I am saying is, there are views which he has expressed which are complementary, and there are opinions he has expressed which differ from what the government is doing. Now, anybody who has a difference of opinion on policies, is that supposed to be taken the way we are taking what Mr. Arun Shouries has said? Unfortunately, my sense is very different. In democracy, I always believe that matbhed is inimical to democracy. Manbhed nahi hone chahiye. Differences in the heart is not what is required. Differences of opinion is critical for the growth of the
Except,
democracy.
what about the fact that he says that your party is run by a Trimurti? That doesn't sound very democratic. That he says this Trimurti has not only offended the opposition, it's alienated many in the party. And what he's suggesting there is that, in fact, this Trimurti, this new leadership, is aloof, inaccessible, and as Nilanjan Mukhopadhyay said, viewed as arrogant.
You see, there I would just say Mr. Shourie has not been an activist of the BJP for a long time.
So he doesn't know.
I mean, such observations coming from people who are inside the system probably will carry a lot of weight. Then from somebody who's not a part of the BJP system for a long time.
All right, that is a fair point you make, because he's not in the inner circle of your party at the moment. But let me put it to Nilanjan Mukhopadhyay, who has perhaps as much knowledge of the party and its functioning as you do. Is he so detached from the party today that Arun Shourie's description of this Trimurti and the assumption that it's alienated people in the party is wrong? Or does he still have a finger in the pie and sufficient ear to the ground to be able to form a correct judgment of the state of feeling in the party?
Well, first of all, let me confess, I do not have an insider's perspective on the BJP. But yes, definitely, I do have a certain reading of the BJP, and my sense says that, yes, here is a party where the leadership has got completely alienated from the cadre. The cadre does not feel as enthusiastic about the party and about the oncoming celebrations of 1 year of government as it did 1 year ago. It is for the party and its top leadership to think as to what has caused for such a major erosion. They have to also think similarly what happened in Delhi. Such erosions do not happen with such an event-turning mandate which they received in May last year.
So is the Trimurti description close to accurate, or is it unfair?
I would say that it is possibly he's being kind to the Prime Minister and his small coterie by using fairly mild words. Some other person, even a critic from within, would possibly use harsher words.
Mir Sharma, is there a wider danger that as the media starts to reflect on the first year of the Modi government, and there will be a lot of such reflection in the next few days, that Arun Shourie has not just set a tone, but perhaps part of the agenda, and others could follow his cue?
I don't think Arun Shourie set out necessarily to undermine the first anniversary in any way. I think it was very clear, however, that he felt that there were certain issues that required discussion in the public domain, and he was willing to set the ball rolling. When it comes to the economic criticism in particular, his criticism is not the first, it is not the sharpest, and it reflects what many other people, including BJP-leaning individuals, have been saying for some time. It reflects what a couple of senior businessmen have said. Others have, of course, disagreed, and there is open debate, but it is not new, and I think the discussion that would have happened about the failures and successes of the Modi administration after 1 year is not substantively changed by this. We just get the sense, however, that it is happening also within the BJP's own supporters in a way that we would not have had otherwise.
Let me pick up on the points, in fact, that Arun Shouries made, and more importantly, the points that he didn't want to accept or acknowledge about the economy. He called the economy directionless. He says it was like looking at a jigsaw puzzle where the pieces were on a mess on the floor and the government doesn't have a big picture, so they don't know how to put it together. But he refused to accept that the government had successfully brought down the fiscal deficit, inflation and CAD, that growth has sharply improved under this government. He was dismissive of improvements in FDI levels in defense, railways, insurance, possibly any improvements coming in terms of GST and land acquisition. All of that, he said, was either because of things that was not in their control, like oil prices and commodity prices falling, or because they got instructions from the court. Wouldn't Arun Jaitley be right in saying this dismissal of my achievements by Arun Shouries is unfair and wrong?
Again, Karan, yes and no. Mr. Shourie is right when he says that much of the success as far as current account deficit, inflation, and also fiscal deficit is concerned owes nothing to what this government may or may not have done. Much of it is as a result of the fact that international oil prices have come down, the subsidy bill has been reduced, and therefore this has happened. Where he's a bit harsh or unfair on Mr. Jaitley and Mr. Modi's, he doesn't give them enough credit for, say, something like FDI and insurance, for the transparent manner in which coal auctions have happened. There, Mr. Modi is I do believe that Mr. Shourie is being less than generous when it comes to
very quickly a technical point. Arun Shouries went out of his way to say that the claim that 2 lakhs was going to be generated by the coal auctions was in fact a misleading figure, that Bakshi and Sethi, 2 authors that he cited, had done research to show that in fact a very small figure, I can't recall the exact amount, 6,000 was going to come in at this stage. The rest would take 30 years to be realized.
It is absolutely correct. Ishan Bakshi and Nitin Sethi wrote an excellent article, series of articles actually, for the Business Standard, analyzing the claims that the government had made about the coal auctions. Found that not only were this 2 lakh crore headline number exaggerated in what I would call a Vinod Rai kind of way, they were essentially any further investigation of whether the auctions had been sufficiently transparent, which required data about the various bids, was being blocked by the government. So it's a very disturbing set of stories, and I urge everyone to read them.
One other thing quickly, Mr. Shourie went out of his way to criticize the government for the handling of taxation. Many people feel that Arun Shouries has mistaken MAT for retrospective taxation, whereas the government's position is that in fact it's the FIIs that are asking for a retrospective amendment, and that maybe here Arun Shouri's critique is wrong.
I think I will answer with something else that Arun Shouries said, which is that finance ministers should not make lawyerly arguments. If the finance minister seeks to demonstrate that India is open for business up again, he should not be going around telling FIIs, well, actually, I'm not being retrospective, you're being retrospective. That's not the way to get it done. And it's quite clear, 3 weeks of doing this, the finance minister has failed. Today, the Wall Street Journal has said Modi should either fix him or fire him. So really, I don't think that that's a response on Mr. Jaitley's part would make sense.
So, Dr. Mittal, I want to take up with you the manner in which your party, its ministers and spokesmen have actually responded to Arun Shouri's comments. Was it the best thing for you to either say that he's a man with a grudge, which is what one of your ministers said, or to claim that he's a fair weather friend, which is what one of your spokesmen said? Would it not have been better to adopt the line of Prakash Javadekar, who in an interview to me on Saturday said that we disagree with Arun Shouries, but he has absolutely every right to say what he wants, and we will not lock horns with him for doing so? To my mind, Prakash Javadekars response was a more astute one than actually finding motivation by saying he has a grudge or painting him as a fair weather friend. Would you agree?
Arunji, well, there are views and there are informations people have, so there are observations. I had just 2 observations to make. One, when it comes to economic issues, I am yet to come across 2 economists who agree with each other. And if they agree with each other, they are not economists. One. Secondly, in politics there are 2 kinds. One is a careerist, the other is an activist. You know, this classical debate has been going on for a very long time, that the activist feels slighted when a careerist becomes paramountly important.
Are you suggesting Arun
Now, when
Shourie is a
Mr.
terrorist?
Shourie himself was
By
inducted into the
implication,
cabinet,
are you
there was a
suggesting
lot of
Arun
murmur.
Shourie is a terrorist?
No, allow me to finish. You know, when Mr. Shourie himself was brought in, he was not a member of the BJP. He took membership of BJP and joined the cabinet. That time also, because I very distinctly remember, there was a lot of murmuring and heartburn as to, you know, if the activists have been responsible for the growth of the party, and here you have somebody from outside. So when he makes a criticism like the para-dropping of Kiran Bedi, I think he's uncharitable. It's very uncharitable. You know, politics is a mix of all kinds. It's not a monolithic kind of a system. It's a heterogeneous system.
I see the point you're making. You're
kinds.
saying that he was para-dropped, therefore he can't be critical of Kiran Bedi being para-dropped. But what you're forgetting
I'm not
is that
saying-
he was
I'm not
para-dropped
saying-
by
I'm not
Atal
saying-
Bihari Vajpayee. So if it was wrong to para-drop
I'm
Arun
not-
Shourie, the fault, the blame lies at least partly with Atal Bihari Vajpayee. You can't then escape that corollary.
You are misinterpreting, sir. Sir,
I'm
you are
simply pointing out the facts, sir. I'm not misinterpreting at all. I'm simply pointing out the facts.
I have pointed out a simile of the situation and said, when Mr. Shourie talks about Kiran Bedi being brought in,
I fully understood the point you were making. It's just the consequences and implications that you don't want to accept that I'm pointing out. But let me leave you there. Nilanjan Mukhopadhyay wants to come.
I just want to.
I have not said it is wrong. I am saying Arun Shourie had the caliber to be brought in that time.
All right.
I'm not saying that is wrong. But when Mr. Shourie makes this as an issue, I think he's being uncharitable.
Okay, you have a right to believe he's being uncharitable.
There is a difference. Let me give a perspective on as to how Mr. Arun Shourie came in. He was brought in first as a member of Parliament of the Rajya Sabha. He was inducted into the ministry by Mr. Vajpayee as a Minister for Planning and Statistics. It was brought in as a part of a two-pronged strategy. One was to bring talent and also to broaden the base of the BJP, to bring in people who are outside the Sangh Parivar. The same strategy, an extension of the strategy which Mr. Advani opted for in 95, to hand over the leadership back to Mr. Vajpayee, because he felt that hardline Hindutva image is not going to enable to get friends to be able to form a coalition. That's the backdrop which happens in the context of the RSS expanding its base through the 1990s.
And Arun Shourie played
he was not para-dropped like Kiran Bedi.
Increasing the approach and appeal of the BJP.
He was not para-dropped to contest elections and lead the campaign from the front like Kiran Bedi was.
I will say the one big difference between Arun Shourie and Kiran Bedi, even if they were para-dropped, one did a great job and one did not. All right, so that I think reflects on the decision to bring each particular decision to bring.
Success nothing feels like failure.
I feel that Kiran Bedi did not win the Delhi election. I feel the facts back me up on this one.
I don't think any of you was a witness to what happened. Probably I have more information on that.
Yes, very well. As far as I know, the BJP got 3 seats in Delhi, but maybe Mr. Mittal can correct me. So that's point one. Point two is, and I think this is very important, Arun Shourie actually refers to this in his interview with you. There is a sense in which he feels that you need expertise in your cabinet as well as from your civil servants. This is a fundamental difference between, I think, the Vajpayee cabinet and the Modi government. Mr. Vajpayee believed in trusting his ministers and expecting his ministers to make a lot of the decisions. And I think Mr. Modi works through his bureaucrats.
Very quickly, do you see any course correction within the BJP, even if it happens silently and out of the public glare?
For its own good, I think course correction will happen, but whatever happens will be behind closed doors. Publicly, they'll continue to call him, either ignore him or call him fair weather friend.
Nilanjan Mukhopadhyay, there's something else I want to raise with you, and it's a sentence from your column. You said of the Sangh Parivar's response to the Shourie interview, and I'm quoting, its members know that the former minister is bang on target when he says that Modi's nature is greatly responsible for several of Modi's flaws. Now, when Arun Shourie made that comment and I tried to question him further, he deflected me. Very quickly, literally in about 30 seconds, why can't I ask you, what is it in Modi's nature that is responsible for Modi's flaws?
Well, primarily he is a classic authoritarian leader who is a bit insecure. As a result of insecure, does not like very talented people in his team. If you go back and look as to how he ran the entire Gujarat government, the years that he was, it was always that basically running through bureaucrats, the ministers were actually pygmies in comparison to him. The same kind of a
That I
strategy
would
runs,
say
that
without
fears
wanting to
genuine talent to come and possibly become a threat to him.
All I will say there, I'm not contesting you, is that when a man is as dominant as Modi, say a Tony Blair or a Margaret Thatcher, their ministers will always be pygmies
Always.
in relation to
Yes.
them. That's not a criticism of the man so much as recognition of the fact that, like Blair and Thatcher,
But there have been
Modi
other
brought a party back to
But there
power.
have been other leaders also, who have had the capacity to take talent along.
True, and great leaders often, in fact, are bad for other people's talent. But I've run right out of time. I simply put that in because
Just
it's a
one minute.
comment that was made of others as well.
The cabinet has enough talent. And to say a Manohar Parrikar is not talent or a Suresh Prabhu or an Arun Shouries
You're misunderstanding, Mr. Mittal. We're not saying that the cabinet doesn't have talent. We're saying that a man like Mr. Modi, compared to a Thatcher, compared to a Tony Blair, who are all the same, becomes dominant in a way in which it seems his dominance makes other people look like pygmies. And this is not a criticism of him. This is recognition of him or Thatcher or Blair's dominance. It's a fact of life that big men make others in comparison look small. But I've run out of time. I have to end this there. We're crashing into the 9 o'clock news, and my apologies, I wasn't able to give you more time. And if you have all been watching, many thanks indeed. Goodbye. Good night. Simply reflecting criticism of the Modi government, but possibly a small group of dissent within the BJP.
I think he's echoing voices which are not being heard outside, which are not being said very loudly. But yes, anybody walking through the corridors of the BJP, talking to people, you do hear there's this word in Hindi which is called sukbugahat, that it's something is simmering beneath the surface. It is there in the cabinet, it is there in very high levels of the party, and it would be there across the length and breadth of various affiliated organizations of the RSS.
Welcome back. You're watching To The Point. The interview Arun Shouries gave this program on Friday has met with two polar opposite responses. Some people view it as a stinging critique of the Modi government that could affect the way it's perceived. Others say Mr. Shourie has a grudge because he hasn't got a position in this government and describe him as a fair weather friend. With me to discuss these two irreconcilable viewpoints is the Associate Editor of the Business Standard, Mihir Sharma, the Prime Minister's best-known biographer, Nilanjan Mukhopadhyay, the Executive Editor of Headlines Today, Javed Ansari, and BJP spokesperson, Sudhanshu Mittal. Mihir Sharma, let me start with you.
We're not talking only about the government, we're not talking only about the party secretariat, we're talking about the entire Sangh Parivar, the entire phalanx of organizations which make up the Sangh Parivar, which is, my estimate is about close to about 100 odd organizations just in every conceivable sphere of political
and an element of dissent runs right through.
It runs right through that. There is a huge element of arrogance in this government, and which is not good. It needs to look outside the small little core group which is running the party and the government.
To right-wing ideology and the BJP in particular. I think it's a little tough to call him a fair weather friend at this point in his career. If he has chosen to speak about whatever his concerns may be, I think he should be seen as a well-wisher by the government. I mean, he represents the view of a lot of people who are sympathetic to them.
Nilanjan Mukhopadhyay, you have an understanding of the BJP that perhaps is unparalleled. Writing in the Economic Times today, you say, and I'm quoting you, Shourie has not only spoken for himself, his views are shared by several others, including party veterans. Does that suggest that Shourie is not the simple issue I want to discuss? Has Arun Shourie embarrassed the BJP with his sharp critique of the Modi government, or is he a fair weather friend with a grudge and an ulterior motive?
I think that it's quite unfair to Mr. Shourie to say he's a fair weather friend. He's been outspoken in his entire career. As a minister under the Vajpayee government, he made no secret of his disagreements with, various other ministers in the cabinet, Murli Manohar Joshi, Ram Naik, George Fernandes. He has, and let's face it, he has dedicated a large proportion of his life to